Hey guys, Ryan Bidoff here, blogging from paradise. Nice little chat to discuss the difference between God's will and the world's will because they are different. And on a worldly level, you could say they're diametrically opposed, but in truth, the world's an illusion and God's the only reality. So, can an illusion oppose reality? No, it's not real. That's really the prime difference. However, I think a lot of us, we are imprinted with the idea that if you see an illusion, if you see something in the world, most of us judge it as God's will. And that's inaccurate because God's will for you and for me and for every mind, every being is perfect happiness. That's my Course in Miracles lesson for today. So I am taking that lesson, intuitively feeling it, feeling like Spirit's like, hey, why don't you flesh this out a little bit? Share happiness with the world and turning it into a piece of content. Now, you guys may know I'm the Blogging from Paradise guy. Usually talk about blogging tips much of the time through different mediums. But today is an example of trusting your intuition and creating a piece of content that helps folks discern the difference between God's will and the world's will. Right? Something we want to be aware of because if what you see is fear, division, separation, unhappiness, depression, if it's anything other than pure love and happiness and joy and peace, it is not God's will. Because God's will is perfect love in eternity. If it's in time, it's not his will because God's eternal. He created you in eternity. He created you eternal because you're spirit. That's his will. If it has anything else to, if it has nothing to do with love and eternity and joy and happiness, it's the world's will, which is an illusion, which is fear, and which was created by the ego. So don't confuse the two, guys, because you are giving God authorship anytime you talk about God's will being fear, a nightmare, hurt, pain, anything in time and space. It's not his will. And you could use logic, your own logic, which is divine logic, because you're eternal spirit, to understand this. However, as you go about this process of forgiving the world's will, which is an illusion, and forgiving the idea that you can attribute fear to God, death to God. No, spirit doesn't create death. Love doesn't create fear. It can't be. It has to be created by the ego in the world. As you go through this process, it's just really uncomfortable because you will unearth many, many limiting beliefs, many fears, many egoic structures that aren't true and that have been keeping you unhappy. If you want love, if you want joy and peace, you got to get rid of these other ideas that appear to block the love and the joy, the peace. You got to get them out of your mind. You have to forgive them. That's what it is. You have to look past. And one such idea is some concept that God could be fear, God could be death, God could be in time and space, that his will would be death, his will would be punishment. It can't be. No matter what the source, God can't create punishment. He only has perfect love for you. God can't create anything in time and space because he's eternity. He's beyond it all. This is a great thing because as you start forgiving, overlooking, looking past, being a passerby of the world, you will be happier and happier and happier and happier because that's God's will for you. And any of the unhappy worldly wills, the world's will, which is purely created by the ego, created by fear, and fear is an illusion, you let that stuff go. Chuckle at it, laugh at it, because it's not real, even though it appears to be, and because it's not God's will. And what's going to happen? You're going to be happier and happier. But again, it's uncomfortable facing, feeling, releasing, expressing the unhappiness, crying, being angry, not projecting onto the world, but just feeling these feelings, expressing them, so you can see that all that unhappiness in your mind and depression, anger, guilt's a big one, grief, that guilt, that crippling guilt. You begin to, as you forgive this idea of the world's will, it's a little uncomfortable to feel it, but then you're thinking, this is never God's will for me. Never God's will. Pure love would not will guilt. It can't be. Now, the ego can, through its insane projections, the ego, not God, absolutely not God, could say that, oh yeah, God wants to punish. The ego can say that God wants to guilt. The ego could believe it. The ego can do all this, and it could use particularly clever mediums to try to condition you to believe these things. You're not going to be happy. You're not going to be doing God's will. You're not going to be listening to God's will. You're not going to be observing God's will, because you are misunderstanding through the ego. And it's a forgiveness process, because we all have so many beliefs that are purely egoic, that are not God's will, that we think are God's will. Why would pure love create disasters? Why would pure love create anything in time and space? Why? It can't make sense, guys, when you logically think it through. But you have to check yourself, because the ego will say, hey, I learned this here, I learned this there, and directly from God's love, directly from God's will of happiness. Well, through here, through there, there'll be various sources. And the issue with the various sources is that if they're not pure love, they're the world's will, which is hell. They're the world's will, which is chaos. They're the world's will, which is fear. There's the world's will, which is ego. God didn't create hell. God didn't create the ego. God didn't create fear. God didn't create madness. He created love. You and I are love. We're eternal spirit. That's what we are. This whole thing, it's an illusion. And you know it's an illusion because it's not eternal. God didn't create it. If God didn't create it, it's not real. Appears to be very real. It seems to be very real. Not disagreeing with you on the appearances, the seemings. I do not disagree. The seemings and the appearances and the illusions appear to be real, yet they're not. What's the upside of believing this truth? You'll be really happy progressively, and you'll be really peaceful, and you'll feel really good, and you'll see God's love, God's will, through the illusion of the insane wills of the world, which aren't real. So no matter what happens in the world, you'll be happy. Isn't that a really good side effect of believing in this? Now, what happens when you don't believe that God's will for you is perfect light and love, and you think that the world's will is his will? You'll be scared, upset, afraid, enraged, angry, judgmental. Does that sound like a good deal? No. No, it's not a good deal. But you have to forgive it. You have to start seeing, oh, shoot, I've been believing this is God's will, but it's been the world's will. Why? Natural disasters, famine, poverty, suffering, all this stuff in time and space, all this ego-created world's will. Doesn't even know it. How can love create that? It can't. However, forgiving is uncomfortable, because you have to lay aside a lot of these beliefs that you and I tend to be programmed with fairly early in our quote unquote human experience, in our mind. It's uncomfortable. But it starts to make sense when you do the inner work. When you don't do the inner work and you're like, no, this is God's will. God punishes. God does this. God does that. That rage and that anger that are in your mind that are purely the ego, purely an illusion, it doesn't serve you. It doesn't help you. It doesn't help, quote unquote, people. It doesn't help other minds. It doesn't. Only hurts. And the silliest point of it all, which is just it's a misunderstanding. There's nothing personal about it. You don't understand. And as you begin to understand, you're like, oh shoot. You start seeing God's will and differentiating from the world's illusory will, and you start treating people with greater love. You don't judge them. You see them as your brothers in God or sisters, modern day. Isn't it worth it to be happy and to live in love and to be in peace, no matter what circumstances, illusions unfold in the world? Isn't it worth it to feel peace and joy and to gain that mindset now that you're eternal spirit and to bring that with you? So you see chaos and madness and anger and rage in the world and you just coast right through happily and smiling and loving, and you're at peace amidst the illusion of chaos and the illusion of the world's will, because God's will is none of it. Oh, God's will. Well, good thing you guys saw I'm doing wisdom chat here. Saw the misspelling. Hey, God's well. I see the symbolism there. The well, unending. So God's will and the world's will, completely different. Train yourself mentally, like in your mind, begin training yourself through mind training to see these things you think are God's will that are fear-based, death-based, time and space-based, anything that you think and you've been taught and conditioned. No way. Love can't create it. Can't do it. And then obviously if you think that love could also be hate and create hate things, and love, eternity could create death, then you have to begin in your mind analyzing the sense of duality, analyzing the sanity that pure love could create anything else other than that. I am pure love. I am pure light. But I hate these people. What? No. Like, look at the Dalai Lama now. A God realized being. I am just pure joy for everyone. Pure joy. He sees the oneness. He sees the love. He sees God. It would be like him saying, I love it all, except I think these group of people or this condition, and I think they're scumbags and they deserve it. Come on, guys, you got to think it through. Start thinking. It's really important to start thinking. And you'll see God's will for us is perfect happiness, and you'll experience it more. You'll be more and more happy. You'll be helping and serving and bonding amidst the illusions appearance of the world's will, which is fear, chaos, separation, madness, death, suffering. It's all created by the ego, and it's all an illusion if you begin to accept this truth. If you fight it, you won't like how it feels. And you're fighting eternity. You're fighting the inevitable. It makes more sense to be happy forever than to be pissed off again and again and again, and to be angry and to judge and to say, no way, I learned it, the world's will. God doesn't even know. So you think you're hurting pure love and pure light from an illusion, or you think that, no, he doesn't. It's not. If you need any guidance in this realm of this concept, acam.org is the site. You can also buy it on Amazon. The book is A Course in Miracles, and the voice with the capital V, Christians will notice him. Catholics will notice him. Maybe not entirely. Some of the concepts, there have been maybe some misunderstandings out there, but overall, though, just the light and the love that we learn in Christianity, Catholicism, that's God's will. That's it. That's what the Course is, the light and the love, and that alone, not including anything else other than light and love, because that's God's will. Eternal love creates eternal love and nothing else, because it's not duality. That's all that it is. That's God's will. He wants you to be happy. And the more you take that happiness with you amidst the world's illusory will of chaos and madness, and you'll be happy, you'll teach others to be happy, and eventually we just beam up off this planet. We're getting there, even if it takes us a million lifetimes. We're getting there. So guys, I love you. Have a great weekend wherever you are in the world. Have a great morning, afternoon, or evening. Until next time, you know what to do. Enjoy paradise, all.